You think retirement means peace. You think after decades of sacrifice, of raising children, of working until your bones ache, you finally get to rest. But sometimes, it's your very own children who turn your golden years into a battlefield. My name is Martha Jennings. I'm 72 years old, and before I begin my story, I'd like to ask you, where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing about the places these stories reach, the homes they enter, and the people who sit down with a cup of tea or coffee to listen. Now, let me take you back. I was born in a small town in Ohio, and my life, like many women of my generation, was shaped by duty, family, and responsibility. I worked as a school teacher for nearly 40 years. 40 years of chalk dust, early mornings, tired evenings, and the stubborn satisfaction of watching children grow into adults who sometimes remembered to say, thank you. When my husband passed away in my 50s, I thought the loneliness would consume me. But teaching kept me alive, gave me purpose. I told myself, you're strong, Martha. You faced worse, and I was strong. Strong enough to raise my daughter Lisa on my own. Strong enough to stretch one income into meals, clothes, tuition, and the thousand other little things that add up to a childhood. Lisa was my pride back then. She was a bright girl, head full of dreams, a smile that could light up a room. I used to tell colleagues at school, she's the reason I push so hard. If she makes it, if she lives better than I did, then it's worth it. And she did make it, or at least that's what it looked like on the surface. She married young, had 2 children of her own, and moved into a nice suburban house with her husband. From the outside, they looked like the picture of a happy family. Inside, though, things were never quite as simple. In retirement, I tried to keep life simple. My pension was modest, but it was steady. Every month, a deposit came into my account, enough for groceries, utilities, and a few small comforts. A warm meal at the diner on Sundays, a knitting club membership, a little extra to send birthday cards with $20 bills tucked inside for my grandchildren. I didn't live lavishly, but I lived with dignity. After years of tightening belts and pinching pennies, I finally felt like I could breathe. But Lisa never saw it that way. Her visits started to come with an edge. At first, it was subtle. She'd glance around my little bungalow and say, "You've got it easy, Mum. No mortgage, no car payments. You just sit here and collect checks every month." I'd laugh it off. But inside, it stung. I wanted to tell her about the nights I graded papers until midnight, or the Saturdays I spent tutoring kids for extra cash instead of resting. I wanted to say, this pension didn't fall from the sky. I earned every cent, but I stayed quiet. Then the hints grew bolder. You don't need much, Mum. You don't travel. You don't go shopping. Why not let us enjoy life while we're still young? I remember one evening in particular. We were sitting at my kitchen table, steam rising from our cups of tea. Lisa leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and said, "You're just hoarding money." "For what? You're not going to live forever. Why not make life easier for your family?" I felt my chest tighten. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the way she said them, as if my life, my needs, my very existence were already expendable. I tried to remind her of the sacrifices, the years I skipped new coats so she could have brand-name shoes, the mornings I left before dawn to catch the bus, just to make sure she had lunch money in her pocket. But she brushed it all aside. "That was your job, Mom. Parents are supposed to sacrifice. Now it's our turn to live." I didn't say it out loud, but the thought burned in my mind. And what about me? Do I not get to live too? There were other signs too, little cracks in the image of family love. Lisa and her husband bought things that didn't add up. A new SUV in the driveway, designer handbags that couldn't possibly be in their budget, weekend getaways when they claimed money was tight. I suspected they were living beyond their means, But I didn't push. I told myself it wasn't my place. I was just the grandmother, the retired school teacher in her little house, watching from the sidelines. But deep down, I felt the shift. I wasn't seen as a mother anymore, or even as a person. I was seen as a resource, a wallet, a safety net they could plunder whenever they pleased. And the storm clouds were already gathering. That night, after Lisa's visit, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window with a blanket around my shoulders, listening to the sound of the wind through the trees. My heart was heavy. Something told me, though I couldn't quite put it into words, that this wasn't just idle talk. Lisa's words weren't just complaints. They were the beginning of something far more dangerous. And I was right. The weeks that followed carried a strange heaviness. Lisa's visits grew shorter, her tone sharper, and her eyes hungrier. Not hungry for food, not hungry for love, but hungry in a way I recognized from my teaching years. The way children looked at something they wanted to grab, regardless of whether it belonged to them or not. I began to notice little things. When she visited, her gaze lingered not on me, but on the small details of my home. The antique clock my late husband had polished every Sunday. The neat stack of bank envelopes I kept in a drawer by the phone. Even the card holder in my purse, resting on the counter while I made us tea. It was as if she was cataloguing what was mine, silently deciding what could, one day, be hers. One evening, she said something that chilled me more than she realized. "You know, Mum," she began, swirling her spoon through her tea, "you should really think about transferring some of your pension into a joint account. It'll be easier when you're not around." She said it so casually, with that dismissive shrug of hers, as if my life was a schedule to be marked off, an inconvenience soon to be cleared. I remember setting my teacup down, my hand trembling slightly. I asked, "Why would I do that, Lisa? My pension is for my living expenses." She laughed, actually laughed. "Living expenses? You hardly spend a dime. You stay home, you knit, you watch TV, you don't even travel. Meanwhile, the kids could use braces. We could take them somewhere nice, let them see the world. Isn't that better than letting money rot in your account?" The words sliced through me. Money rotting. My pension was my lifeline. Every check was a promise that I wouldn't have to depend on anyone else, that I wouldn't be a burden. And still, I tried to be gentle. I reminded her how hard I had worked for that pension, how every cent was tied to years of chalk-dusted skirts, tired feet, and stacks of essays waiting for red ink. She rolled her eyes. "You're making it sound like charity. Parents are supposed to sacrifice. You did your job. Now it's our turn to live." I wanted to scream, to ask her when my turn to live would come. But the words stuck in my throat. The memory of sacrifices haunted me in those days. I thought back to when she was 16, wanting a dress for prom. The store wanted $100. At that time, $100 was nearly a week's worth of groceries. I worked extra tutoring sessions, skipped lunches, and managed to buy it. I'll never forget the way her face lit up when she wore it. Moments like those had kept me going. I thought they would plant gratitude in her heart, but instead, they seemed to have planted something else, a belief that I would always give, that she was entitled to keep taking. Her entitlement wasn't just about me, it seeped into every part of her life. Her husband, Peter, once complained over dinner that he was drowning in bills. But the very next weekend, Lisa came back from a trip to the mall with a new handbag slung over her shoulder. "It was on sale," she said with a smirk, as if that erased the price tag. And when I gently asked if everything was all right financially, she snapped, "Why do you care? Are you going to pay our mortgage too?" I sat back in silence, the words pressing down on me. Even my grandchildren, bless them, picked up on her attitude. One day, the eldest, just 15, said, "Grandma, Mum says you're lucky. You get money for free every month. Money for free." That's how she described my pension to her children. I nearly cried. Wanted to tell him about the nights I came home with aching legs, my voice hoarse from lecturing 30 restless students. I wanted to tell him that nothing had ever been free in my life, that every cent had been clawed from sweat, exhaustion, and sacrifice. But he was just a boy. I didn't want to burden him with truths too heavy for his shoulders. My friends noticed the strain too. At knitting club, my neighbour Clara asked, "Martha, is everything all right?" "You look pale," I smiled, deflecting as I always did. "Oh, just tired." But deep down, I was more than tired. I was afraid. Afraid of what my own daughter was becoming, afraid of the coldness in her eyes, afraid that love wasn't enough anymore to keep her from crossing a line I prayed she would never cross. And then came the moment that stripped away all pretense. Lisa leaned across the table one afternoon, her eyes sharp, her tone icy. "You don't need your pension, Mom." "We do." It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't even a request. It was a declaration. I froze, my breath catching. My chest ached as I stared at the child I had raised, the child I had bled and sacrificed for, now speaking to me like I was nothing more than an obstacle in her path. She said the words with a confidence that chilled me, as if she'd already decided it was hers, and I had no say in the matter. That night, I didn't sleep again. I sat awake, staring at my purse, at the card tucked inside it, and I knew, deep in my bones, that trouble was coming. I just didn't know how soon. The storm didn't wait long to break. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind where the sunlight filters gently through lace curtains, making everything seem deceptively calm. I had baked a peach cobbler that morning, one of Lisa's favourites, and set it on the counter to cool. Old habits die hard, I suppose, always wanting to feed the people who so often left me hungry in other ways. When Lisa arrived, she didn't even notice the cobbler. She didn't greet me with a hug or ask how I was. Instead, she dropped her purse on the chair, crossed her arms, and stared at me with a look I'd only seen once before, when she was a teenager demanding car keys she hadn't earned. "Mum," she began, her voice flat. "We need to talk." I braced myself. "You don't need your pension," she said, matter-of-factly. "We do. Peter and I want to take the kids on vacation this summer. Somewhere nice. They deserve it. And honestly, Mum, what are you even doing with that money? You don't go anywhere. You don't buy anything. You just let it sit there." Her words hit me like stones. I blinked at her, searching for the daughter I once knew beneath the steel in her eyes. I tried to reason with her. "Lisa, my pension isn't extra money. It's my lifeline. It pays my bills, my groceries, my medicine." She waved her hand, dismissing me like a child interrupting an adult. "Medicine? Bills? That barely costs anything. You're exaggerating. Meanwhile, I've got 2 kids who need to see the world before they're grown. Don't you want your grandchildren to experience more than this tiny town?" The way she said "tiny town," dripping with disdain, as though the life I'd built was something to be ashamed of, it broke something in me. I tried again, gently. "Lisa, I'm not saying no to helping when I can. But my pension, it isn't yours to spend. I worked for it. I sacrificed for it." Her eyes narrowed. "Sacrificed. You act like raising me was some kind of punishment. You're selfish, Mom. You have more than enough, and you'd rather hoard it than see your family happy." Selfish. The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Selfish. After decades of sleepless nights, of pouring myself into her education, of denying myself the simplest pleasures, just so she could have more. Selfish. After I handed over my youth, my body, my life to raise her. But instead of laughter, tears burned behind my eyes. Lisa leaned closer, her tone hardening. "You have 2 choices. You either let us use that pension card for the vacation, or we'll find another way. And trust me, Mum, you won't like it." The threat in her voice made my stomach twist. Another way? I asked, my voice quieter now, laced with fear. She shrugged, almost smug. You'll see. And with that, she grabbed her purse, tossed her hair over her shoulder, and left. I sat at that table long after she'd gone, staring at the untouched cobbler, the golden crust now cold and uninviting. My hands trembled as I folded them in my lap. I wanted to call someone, an old friend, maybe Clara from Knitting Club, but shame held me back. What would I even say? That my own daughter had demanded my pension like it was her birthright? That she had looked at me not as a mother, but as a vault she was entitled to crack open? The silence in the house pressed against me, suffocating. That night, I lay in bed replaying every stage of Lisa's life. Her first steps, when she stumbled toward me with arms wide. Her first words, whispered in the dark. The proud moment when she walked across the graduation stage, waving at me in the crowd. Where had that little girl gone? When had she been replaced by this cold, grasping woman who looked at me not with love, but with calculation? I wanted to believe it was a phase, a moment of desperation. I wanted to believe that deep down, she still saw me as her mother, not her obstacle. But in my heart, I knew better. 2 days later, she returned, her mood strangely light. She brought the kids, who ran into my living room and sprawled across the couch, their eyes glued to their phones. "See, Mom?" Lisa said, smiling as though nothing had happened. "We'll all be happier if you just stop clinging to money you don't need. Everyone will benefit." I didn't answer. My silence made her frown, but she pressed on, talking about beaches and resorts, about packages she'd already looked into. I listened, but I didn't hear her. My ears buzzed with the echo of her earlier words. "We'll find another way." And I began to wonder, what exactly did she mean by that? When she left, I checked my purse. My pension card was still there, nestled between my ID and a few crumpled bills. Relief washed over me for a moment, but it didn't last, because the look in her eyes told me she wasn't finished, and I feared the next move she made would cross a line that could never be uncrossed. It happened sooner than I expected. One small act, so simple on the surface, yet it split my world in two. It was the following week. Lisa stopped by, saying she just wanted to check in. She was sweeter than usual, her tone honeyed, her smile stretched a little too wide. I should have recognized it for what it was, the calm before a storm. We sat in the living room, sipping tea. She asked about my knitting club, about the neighbor's dog that always barked at the mailman. Her questions were light, casual, but her eyes weren't on me. They flicked, every so often, to the purse resting on the side table beside my chair. I noticed. I felt it. A mother knows when her child is plotting something, even if she doesn't want to admit it. When she got up to refill her cup, she insisted I stay seated. "Relax, Mum. I'll take care of it. You're always fussing about being the host." It struck me as odd, but I didn't protest. My knees were aching that day, and it felt good to sit still for once. I watched her in the kitchen, moving with ease, chatting about nothing in particular. But what I didn't see, what I only realized later, was that when she returned, her hand brushed against my purse. Quick, subtle, a sleight of hand I never thought my own daughter capable of. The next morning, I went to the grocery store. I picked up my usual items, milk, eggs, bread, a small cut of chicken for soup, and walked to the register. When I reached for my purse, my pension card was gone. At first, I panicked. I searched every pocket, every fold, my hands trembling as the line behind me grew restless. I pulled out tissues, receipts, even the little notebook where I wrote my shopping lists. But the card, my lifeline, was missing. The cashier gave me a sympathetic smile. "It happens all the time. Maybe you left it at home?" I forced a smile, nodded, and paid with the small bills I had tucked in my wallet. But inside, my stomach churned. I knew I hadn't left it at home. I knew exactly where it had gone. When I got home, I tore the house apart. The drawers, the couch cushions, the counter by the phone. Nothing. The card had vanished, as if it had never been there at all. That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing Lisa's voice in my head. We'll find another way. And in the silence of the dark, it hit me. She had found her way. The following morning, I called the bank. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Yes, Mrs. Jennings, the representative said, his tone professional. There have been several large withdrawals from your account in the past 24 hours. Do you recognize these? He read the list aloud. A resort booking, luxury clothing stores, restaurants in another state, thousands of dollars, drained in a matter of hours. My breath caught. No, I whispered. I didn't make those. There was a pause. Then, Mum, we need to take immediate action. This is theft. The word rang in my ear. Theft. And yet my heart twisted. Theft by a stranger is one thing. Theft by your own flesh and blood. It shatters you in ways no criminal on the street ever could. I hung up the phone and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the spot where my husband once sat, years ago, sipping his coffee and grumbling about the morning paper. What would you do, John? I whispered into the empty room. Would he tell me to call the police? To protect myself, even if it meant handing our daughter over to consequences she had earned? Or would he tell me to forgive, to protect the family name, to shield her from shame even if it cost me everything? Tears burned my eyes. I wanted to believe I still had a daughter, but all I could see was a woman who looked like her, spoke like her, and stole from me without a shred of remorse. I wrestled with myself that entire day. My love for her clawed at me, begged me to stay silent, to let it slide. But my dignity, my survival, screamed louder. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes, silence doesn't keep a family together. It just hands the abuser another weapon, and I wasn't sure I had the strength left to hand her mine. That night, I checked Lisa's social media, and there it was. Photos. Dozens of them. Lisa on a white sandy beach, sunglasses perched on her head, cocktail in hand. Peter grinning beside her in a brand new shirt I'd never seen before. The kids splashing in turquoise water, laughing as if they had no care in the world. Caption after caption. Finally living our best life. Family deserves a break. Blessed, shakta vacation mode. My heart dropped into my stomach. Not because of the money, not even because of the betrayal, but because she flaunted it, as if my sacrifice, my survival, my future meant nothing. And to make matters worse, friends from town began tagging me in the comments. Your daughter's vacation looks amazing, Martha. You must be so proud. Proud. I closed the computer with shaking hands, bile rising in my throat. For the first time in my life, I felt something I never thought I would feel toward my own child. Not disappointment, not sadness, but anger. Pure, burning anger. And I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Anger is a strange thing at my age. It doesn't come in loud outbursts or slammed doors the way it might when you're young. No, at 72, anger comes quietly, like a storm gathering behind your ribs, steady and cold. For days after discovering those photos, I carried that storm inside me. Each new picture Lisa posted was like another crack of thunder, her toes buried in white sand. A lobster dinner spread across a linen table, Peter in a rented convertible, grinning like a boy who'd just gotten away with stealing candy. And all of it, every indulgence, every smirk, paid for with the pension I had bled decades to earn. What hurt most wasn't the theft itself, but the performance. The way Lisa turned my loss into her theatre of triumph. People from church called me. Did you see Lisa's vacation, Martha? How wonderful of you to help them out like that. Neighbors waved from across the street. You must be so generous, letting your family enjoy life while you stay modest here. Generous. That was the word that cut deepest. Because I hadn't been generous, I had been robbed. And yet in their eyes, I was the kindly old woman who handed her pension away with a smile. It made me feel small, powerless, stripped not only of money, but of dignity. One afternoon, I was in the grocery store when an acquaintance from my knitting group spotted me by the produce section. "Well, Martha," she said brightly, "you've really outdone yourself. I told my husband we should be more like you, giving the kids everything they want, even when it means going without." I gripped the shopping cart handle until my knuckles whitened. She meant it kindly, but each word was a twist of the knife. "Thank you," I forced out. My voice cracked. I hurried away before the tears could spill. At home, I sat by the window, staring at the empty street. For the first time in years, I felt ashamed of myself. Ashamed for being blind. Ashamed for being weak. Ashamed for letting my own daughter strip me down to this. And yet, under the shame, something else began to stir. A whisper I had ignored for too long. "You don't have to accept this." That night, I poured myself a cup of tea and pulled out the little box of keepsakes I rarely opened. Inside were photos of my husband, John, smiling on our wedding day. Letters he'd written me while he was away for work. A pressed flower from our first anniversary. Holding them, I heard his voice in my head as clearly as if he were beside me. "You've carried this family your whole life, Martha. Don't let anyone break you now." It was then I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about my name, my worth, my right to live out the years I had earned with dignity. Lisa thought she had taken everything from me, but she had overlooked one thing. I wasn't finished fighting. The next morning, I called the bank again. The representative confirmed what I already knew. My account had been drained nearly to the last cent. The resort booking alone had cost more than I'd ever spent on myself in a single year. "Mrs. Jennings," he said carefully, "we've flagged these transactions as suspicious. You'll need to confirm you didn't authorize them." "I didn't," I said firmly. My voice didn't shake this time. "Then we'll escalate this as a theft case," he replied. Theft. Again, that word. It stung, but it also gave me a strange relief. Because finally, someone outside my four walls was calling it what it was. Later that evening, I checked Lisa's page again. She had posted a video of herself raising a glass of champagne. "To new adventures," she laughed into the camera. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. "You deserve it. Beautiful family. So glad you're living it up." My hands trembled as I closed the laptop. No one saw the truth behind the glittering pictures. No one saw the mother sitting alone in her bungalow, heating a can of soup for dinner because her pension had been emptied. But soon, they would. Because the bank wasn't the only one watching now. I had filed the theft report. The investigation was underway. Lisa thought she had pulled off her perfect heist, but she had no idea the clock was ticking. And when it ran out, the show she had staged online would come crashing down. I leaned back in my chair that night, the storm in my chest settling into something sharper. Not just anger anymore. Resolve, I whispered into the empty room. "You took my pension, Lisa, but you won't take me." And for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly, because I knew justice was on its way. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I had just finished watering the geraniums on the porch when the phone rang inside. I almost didn't answer. These days, half the calls are robocalls, strangers asking about warranties or fake lotteries. But something told me to pick it up. "Mrs. Jennings?" a polite male voice asked. "Yes, this is she. This is David from the fraud department at First State Bank. We need to speak with you regarding unusual activity on your pension account." My knees buckled. I gripped the counter, steadying myself. "Yes," I whispered. He read the list aloud. Resort charges, high-end clothing stores, airline tickets, withdrawals from ATMs in a different state, thousands of dollars, all in the last 10 days. Do you confirm you authorized these charges? He asked. My throat tightened. Saying the truth out loud felt like a betrayal of my own heart, but I forced the words through my lips. No, I did not authorize them. There was a pause on the other end, then his tone grew sharper, more official. Thank you, Ma'am. In that case, we'll escalate this as a theft. Your card has been flagged and the account frozen. Further withdrawals will be impossible frozen. For the first time in weeks, relief surged through me, like a door had slammed shut before Lisa could strip the last scrap of security from me. But the relief was short-lived. Mrs. Jennings, David continued, we're obligated to inform the authorities about this theft. Do you have any idea who might have access to your card? My lips trembled. Do I tell them? Do I say my daughter's name? 1,000 memories rushed through me. Lisa, in pigtails, handing me a crayon drawing of our family. Lisa, in her prom dress, glowing with excitement. Lisa, in her wedding gown, clutching my hand as she whispered, Thank you, Mom. I couldn't have done this without you. And then, Lisa on a beach, sipping champagne, laughing as if my life savings were her play money. I took a deep breath. Yes, I do. That afternoon, an officer came to my house. A young man, barely older than my grandson, notebook in hand. He asked careful questions, his tone respectful, but firm. Who had access to the card? My daughter, I said, the words cracking in my throat. I expected pity, maybe even judgment, but he simply nodded. Unfortunately, it happens more often than you'd think. Family members can be the hardest cases. I wanted to ask him if it ever gets easier, turning your own blood into a suspect. But the words wouldn't form. That evening, I sat in silence, my teacup cooling in my hands. I had always imagined old age as a time of rest, of gentle evenings and slow mornings. But here I was, sitting in my kitchen while a bank officer and a policeman filed my daughter's name under the word thief. The ache in my chest wasn't just grief. It was betrayal, plain and sharp. The next day, Lisa returned from her trip, tanned and smug, a silk scarf tied around her neck. She strolled into my kitchen like she owned it, her heels clicking against the linoleum. Mum, she said, tossing her sunglasses onto the table. Why isn't the card working? I tried to use it at the airport, and it kept saying declined. What did you do? Her voice wasn't curious. It was accusatory, sharp as a whip. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling around the teacup. The bank froze it. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. What do you mean, froze it? Why would they do that? Because I reported the charges, I said softly. I told them I didn't authorize them. For a moment, silence hung between us, thick and heavy. Then Lisa laughed, a cold, bitter laugh. So you're really going to play victim? Your own daughter, Mum? You'd rather side with strangers than with me? I looked at her, really looked at her, and I didn't see my child anymore. I saw a woman who had decided that I was expendable, a stepping stone on her path to indulgence. My voice was calm when I replied, You didn't give me a choice, Lisa. You stole from me. The bank knows. The police know. And now, you know I won't stay silent. Her face twisted with anger. You're pathetic. A useless old woman clinging to scraps. You should be grateful we even thought of including you in our lives. Her words sliced through me, but I didn't flinch. Not this time. That night, after she stormed out, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the little stack of bank statements the officer had left me. Each line of withdrawal was proof, black ink on white paper, of Lisa's betrayal. I thought of my late husband again, of all the times he told me I was stronger than I believed. And for the first time, I felt it. Yes, I had been robbed, humiliated, betrayed, but I was not broken. And I vowed then, the next chapter of this story would not be written by Lisa's greed. It would be written by my resolve. The knock came just after supper. I had been sitting at the table with a bowl of soup, the silence in the house pressing down on me, when the sharp raps echoed through the hallway. My heart knew before my feet carried me to the door. I opened it to find Lisa standing there, arms folded, lips pursed. Her once perfect vacation tan now looked uneven in the porch light, but the fury in her eyes was bright and alive. "We need to talk," she snapped, pushing past me before I could even reply. She dropped her bag on the chair and whirled around. "What the hell did you do?" "The bank called, Peter. They're saying the account's under investigation. Do you realize what you've done to us?" I swallowed, steadying myself. "What I've done? Lisa, it was my pension you drained, my card you took, my security you stole." She rolled her eyes, scoffing. "Stole? Don't be dramatic. It's family money. Everything you have is only because of me, anyway. If you hadn't had a child, you'd have nothing. You should be thanking me." Her words stung like salt in an open wound. "Thanking you?" I whispered. "Lisa, I worked 40 years for that pension. 40 years of standing on aching feet, grading papers until my eyes blurred, skipping meals so you could have dresses, shoes, books. And you stand here, telling me I should thank you for stealing what little I have left." Her face hardened. "You're old, Mom. You don't need vacations or new clothes. You don't need savings. But we do. We have responsibilities. Kids. Bills. A life. Don't you care about us?" My chest tightened. Of course I care. I've cared my entire life. That's all I've ever done. But caring doesn't mean letting you bleed me dry. Love doesn't mean turning a blind eye to theft. She smirked, bitter and cold. "You wouldn't dare call the police. You'd never humiliate your own daughter like that. You don't have the guts." For a moment, silence filled the room. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, steady and relentless. Then I lifted my chin. My voice was steady, quiet, but firm. "Lisa, they already know. The bank. The authorities. It's out of my hands now." Her mask cracked. She stepped forward, her voice rising. "You'd ruin your own family? Over a few $1,000s?" I met her gaze. It wasn't just money. It was trust, respect, dignity. And you shattered it. Her cheeks flushed, her hands balled into fists. "You always act like a martyr, Mum. Poor little Martha, always sacrificing. Well, guess what? No one cares. You're just a bitter old woman clinging to pennies. When you die, everything you have will be ours anyway. Why not hand it over now?" The words hit me like a slap. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white, but my voice didn't shake. Because I'm not dead yet. And while I'm alive, I will not be treated like I don't matter. Something flickered in her eyes then. Anger, yes, but also shock. She wasn't used to me standing tall. She wasn't used to me saying no. For years, I had bent to her whims, smoothed over conflicts, offered excuses for her selfishness. But that woman was gone. Lisa tried one last tactic, her voice dripping with manipulation. "Mom, think of the kids. Do you want them to suffer? Do you want them to see their grandmother ruin their parents' lives?" I closed my eyes briefly, and I saw my grandchildren's faces. Innocent, caught in a web they didn't weave. My heart ached. But when I opened my eyes, I spoke with clarity. "I will always love them. But loving them doesn't mean allowing you to destroy me. They need to learn that actions have consequences. And you," I pointed to her, my hand trembling, not with fear, but with rage, "you need to learn that too." The room went still. Then came a knock at the door. Not the sharp, impatient knock of my daughter, a firm, official one. Lisa's face paled. I moved slowly to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. 2 officers stood there, calm but purposeful. "Mrs. Jennings?" one asked. "We'd like to speak with you about your fraud report. Is now a good time?" I stepped aside. Yes, come in. Lisa's eyes widened. Mom, no. You wouldn't. You can't. But I didn't look at her. I looked at the officers, and for the first time in a long time, I felt powerful. As they began their questions, Lisa's protests grew louder, shriller. This is insane. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's old. The officer's pen scratched across his notepad. He didn't even glance at her excuses. And I realized in that moment that her words, the same words that had made me doubt myself for months, no longer had power, because the truth was written in black and white, because the law was finally on my side, and because I had found my voice again. The living room, once my sanctuary, had become a battlefield. Lisa stood by the window, arms crossed, her voice sharp and defensive. This is ridiculous. She's old. She probably misplaced the card and is blaming me. You can't take her seriously. But the officers didn't flinch. One of them, a tall man with a calm voice, asked me to sit. He opened his notebook. Mrs. Jennings, can you confirm when you last saw your pension card? I took a breath, steadying myself. The day before Lisa visited. I kept it in my purse, like always. The next morning, it was gone. And then the withdrawals began. Lisa's voice rose. That proves nothing. Anyone could have taken it. The officer glanced at her, unimpressed. Ma'am, the charges match your vacation itinerary. Flights, resorts, restaurants, all tied to your name through booking confirmations. Would you like to explain that? For the first time, Lisa faltered. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. I watched her, my heart twisting. This was my daughter, the child I had carried, loved and nurtured. And here she was, cornered by her own greed, unraveling before my eyes. Part of me wanted to reach out, to shield her. But another part, the part that had been ignored and trampled for years, whispered, no, she must face this. Because love without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. The second officer, a younger woman, spoke gently to me. Mrs. Jennings, you've taken the right steps. You're not alone in this. Too many elderly citizens are exploited by family. It takes courage to report it. Her words nearly broke me. Courage. I hadn't felt courageous. I had felt weak, ashamed, desperate. But maybe courage doesn't always roar. Maybe sometimes courage is a trembling voice saying enough. Lisa snapped out of her silence, her eyes flashing. So what now? You're going to arrest me? In my mother's house? In front of her neighbors? You'll destroy this family over a mistake? Mistake? I said, my voice steady. Emptying my account, parading on beaches, laughing while I worried how I'd pay my bills. That wasn't a mistake, Lisa. That was a choice. She turned on me then, her face red, her voice venomous. You think you're so noble, don't you? Sitting here, clinging to your little pension. You've ruined everything. You're pathetic. The words no longer cut as deeply as they once did. Because I knew, finally, they weren't truth. They were the flailing of someone who had been caught. The officers explained the next steps. The bank would continue its investigation. Lisa could be charged with fraud, theft, and elder financial abuse. They gave me case numbers, documents to sign. Lisa tried to argue, but each word made her sound smaller, shriller, less credible. Finally, one of the officers turned to her. Ma'am, I suggest you cooperate. The evidence is substantial. If you want to avoid making this worse, you should consider legal counsel. Lisa's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from her. For once, she looked less like a predator and more like a frightened child. But I couldn't let pity win. Not now. When the officers left, promising follow-up, the house fell into silence. Lisa stood in the middle of the room, her chest rising and falling, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. Fear, anger, maybe even shame. She broke it first. You'll regret this, Mom. You'll die alone, and no one will care. I stood slowly, gripping the edge of the table for balance. My knees ached, but my voice didn't waver. I'd rather die alone with dignity than live surrounded by people who treat me like nothing. Her face twisted. She grabbed her bag and stormed out, the door slamming so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. I sank into my chair, exhaustion flooding me, but under the weariness was something else. Relief. For the first time in years, I hadn't caved. I hadn't smoothed things over or sacrificed myself for the sake of keeping peace. I had stood up, for my dignity, for my life, for the years I still had left. The storm was far from over. There would be hearings, paperwork, maybe even court. The family would whisper, neighbors might gossip, but none of that mattered. What mattered was that I had finally drawn the line. That night, I made myself a cup of tea. I sat by the window, the same window where I had once stared out, consumed by shame. This time I felt something different. Not peace, exactly, but strength. Quiet, steady strength. I lifted the cup to my lips and whispered into the night, John, I did it. I kept us safe, even from her. And somewhere deep inside, I felt his approval.